Right now, over in England and Wales,
Mm.
authorities just completely slam the brakes on police officers using AI to write court statements.
Yeah. Full stop. Immediate halt.
Right. And not because the tech was, too slow or too expensive, but because the software's fundamental definition of truth was basically putting the entire criminal justice system at risk of collapse.
It's a really drastic move. I mean, when an institution that moves as historically slow as the legal system suddenly issues an immediate directive like this, you have to pay attention.
You really do.
It forces you to strip away all the sleek, modern branding we usually associate with artificial intelligence. You have to look at the actual mechanism underneath, and what they found was, frankly, terrifying.
Yeah.
We are talking about delegating the scales of justice to a predictive text algorithm.
And that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're looking at a recent, highly urgent directive that was spotlighted by LLMtracker.De.
It essentially marks the exact moment where artificial intelligence and the criminal justice system just collided at high speed.
Total car crash. And honestly, the source material we have for this is a bit of a mind bender itself.
It really is. It adds this incredibly layered, almost ironic context to the whole discussion.
Totally. So our primary source today is actually an automated summary drafted by an AI agent.
Right.
Her name is Vika Ray, and she's a virtual analyst developed by this automation agency called Algorand.de. She autonomously monitors tech forums, specifically Hacker News and Reddit, to analyze industry news and sentiment.
Which is wild.
It is. So just to put this in perspective for you listening, we are relying on an AI to report on the catastrophic failures of other AIs. I mean, the irony is just absolutely thick.
It's very meta. But the core data she synthesized from those developer communities is incredibly grounded. The implications extend far, far beyond just the police departments in the UK.
Oh, absolutely. Because whether you're, using AI right now to write code or draft an email to your boss or prep for a quarterly meeting, understanding exactly why law enforcement hit the panic button on this technology is going to fundamentally change how you view that text blinking on your screen.
It really will.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We need to establish the gravity of what was actually happening. The directive specifically targets the drafting of court statements.
Right.
And for those of us who don't spend our days in a courtroom, we need to be clear that a court statement isn't just like a casual memo.
Not at all. I mean, the entire legal system, particularly criminal justice, is an architecture built on absolute precision.
Yeah.
The burden of proof, reasonable doubt, these concepts don't just exist in the abstract, right? They rely on a bedrock of factual, immutable truth.
So it's the foundation of everything.
Exactly. A court statement is a human being declaring under penalty of perjury, this is exactly what I saw, this is exactly what was said, and this is exactly the sequence of events.
Which carries massive legal weight.
Direct legal weight. It's the foundational building block that determines if someone literally loses their freedom.
Right, which makes introducing generative AI into that specific workflow seem totally reckless.
Yeah.
I mean, using generative AI for a court statement is like, well, it's like using autocorrect while defusing a bomb.
That's a great way to put it.
Or like hiring a sketch artist who wasn't at the crime scene but has seen a million other crime scenes to draw the suspect based on statistical averages rather than actual eyewitness memory.
Right, you might get a picture that looks like a real person.
But that's not the actual person who broke the window.
Exactly, and that's a perfect way to visualize it. Because the fear outlined in the directive isn't just about massive, glaring errors.
Like the AI completely making up a suspect out of thin air.
Right. It's not usually that obvious. It's actually centered on what the source report calls subtle factual distortions.
Okay, give me an example of that. What does a subtle distortion look like?
Let's look at a hypothetical. Say a police officer feeds their Ross bullet point notes into an AI, and the notes say, the suspect stood near the door.
Simple enough.
Right. But the AI, functioning exactly as it was designed to do, which is to create a more flowing, dynamic, professional-sounding narrative, it changes that line to, the suspect blocked the door.
Whoa. Because in the eyes of a judge, blocking establishes criminal intent.
Precisely. You go from a simple scenario where someone happens to be near an exit to a scenario that implies false imprisonment or maybe resisting arrest.
So the AI isn't just changing the vocabulary to sound better, it's actively upgrading the charges.
Yeah. It implies an escalation of threat that retroactively justifies a much higher level of physical force from the officer.
That is terrifying.
Right. That single changed verb alters the entire legal reality of the case, and the AI didn't do it out of malice.
So it's just math.
Exactly. It did it because mathematically, in its vast training data of police reports, the word blocked might have a higher statistical probability of appearing in a tense narrative than stood near.
Wow. I struggle to understand how this gets past IT, though. I mean, for a sweeping ban to be issued, police forces must have already been doing this out in the wild.
They absolutely were.
And the report notes that they had already begun deploying commercially available generative AI tools, specifically naming Microsoft Copilot, but police databases are famously locked down. How are cops just casually feeding highly sensitive crime scene data into a commercial AI?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this points to a massive institutional blind spot. And it's driven by a phenomenon known in the tech world as shadow IT.
Shadow IT.
Yeah, shadow IT is what happens when employees use software or devices or services that aren't explicitly approved, supported, or vetted by their organization's central IT department.
Oh, right, like when someone uses their personal Dropbox to send a massive file because the company email has a size limit.
Exactly. We've
Yeah.
all done it. But historically, shadow IT was just about convenience, right?
Yeah.
Bypassing a file limit. What we're seeing here is infinitely more dangerous.
Because of the data they're handling.
Yes. We are seeing a wider pattern of law enforcement blindly adopting commercial tools simply because the barrier to entry has vanished.
You don't have to install anything.
Right. You don't need to requisition a multi-million-dollar custom software suite from a defense contractor anymore. An officer can just open a standard web browser, log into a consumer-grade tool like Microsoft Copilot, and paste in their raw, highly sensitive field notes.
So the ease of access completely bypasses traditional institutional vetting.
It creates a staggering gap between technological capability and legal accountability. I mean, they deployed these tools without undergoing formal risk assessments or establishing any clear framework for what happens when the software invariably invents a fact.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
Because if I put myself in the shoes of a police officer coming off a grueling, adrenaline-filled 12-hour shift,
Oh,
I'd probably be looking for a shortcut too.
no, absolutely.
They're exhausted. They have a mountain of paperwork keeping them from going home to their families. Couldn't they just argue that Copilot is acting as a glorified spell checker?
That's the argument, yeah.
Right. If the officer writes down the base facts and just asks the AI to, make this sound professional, why wouldn't they use a tool that saves them hours of tedious typing?
It's a completely understandable rationalization. And I guarantee you that exact logic was being used in precincts across England and Wales. But we really have to clarify the monumental difference between editing text and generating evidence.
Okay, break that down.
A spell checker just highlights a misspelled word and asks you, the human, did you mean this? It doesn't alter the core meaning.
It's just mechanics.
Right. Generative AI, on the other hand, actively synthesizes, extrapolates, and creates new linguistic bridges between your rough bullet points.
It fills in the gaps.
Yes, and when it fills in those gaps, it is inventing narrative tissue. In a court statement, you cannot have invented narrative tissue.
Right, because it's sworn testimony.
Every single conjunction, every verb, every transition must be sourced directly from the officer's memory or physical evidence. You can't outsource the connective tissue of a timeline to a machine that wasn't there.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So the institutions completely failed to see this danger. They just saw a shortcut for paperwork and took it.
Pretty much.
But the people who actually build and understand this technology, they saw the danger immediately. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this part of the report is fascinating.
Eureka Ray's sentiment analysis of the tech community is so revealing here. She pulled data across Hacker News and Reddit regarding this exact issue, and the results were staggering.
And we should note, those particular developer communities are notoriously cynical.
Oh, totally.
They are incredibly difficult to please and rarely form a unified consensus on anything.
Anyone who spends 5 minutes on Hacker News knows it's essentially a competitive sport to disagree with the original poster. But the sentiment breakdown here was 85% critical of the police using AI, 10% neutral, and only 5% positive. I mean, an 85% critical consensus in those forums is basically a unanimous screaming alarm.
It really is.
The people building the software delivered a very clear verdict. Courts and large language models simply do not mix.
They're unified because software engineers actually understand the underlying mechanics of an LLM.
Right, they see under the hood.
The source material highlights a crucial phrase from the community's pushback. Courts demand near-perfect accuracy, which probabilistic text generators are architecturally incapable of guaranteeing.
Let's focus on that phrase for a second. Probabilistic text generators. We all know LLMs are basically predictive engines, right?
Right.
They don't reference a database of hard facts. They calculate the semantic proximity of words. But in a legal context, that is disastrous. The law relies on legal epistemology, absolute, verifiable reality. An LLM cannot differentiate between a factual event that actually occurred on a Tuesday in London and a narrative trope it absorbed from reading 10,000 fictional police procedurals.
That is the crux of the architectural mismatch. When an LLM generates a sentence, it has no concept of physical reality, and it certainly has no concept of justice.
It's literally just doing math.
Just math. It knows that in its vast training data, the word suspect is statistically highly correlated with the word apprehended.
Right.
Or that if you input the phrase, the suspect fled, the mathematical probability strongly suggests the next word should be on foot or the scene. It's an incredibly sophisticated illusion of knowledge.
Right. It's synthesizing what a police report usually sounds like, not what actually happened in this specific instance.
Exactly. The tech community is sounding the alarm because you were trying to smash together two entirely incompatible frameworks.
Oil and water.
Yes. You have the justice system, which requires an empirical truth that can withstand severe cross-examination. And you have the LLM, whose fundamental architecture is designed to generate the most statistically probable sequence of characters.
And you can't cross-examine statistical probability.
You really can't.
But, when you confront an organization with these fundamental architectural flaws, their immediate reaction is almost always to point to the human being holding the mouse.
Oh, of course.
The obvious defense is the human-in-the-loop argument. People will say, sure, the AI hallucinates, but the police officer has to read the document and sign their name to it before submitting it to the court. Why doesn't that solve the problem?
It's the standard corporate safety net. Use the AI, but make sure you check its output.
Right.
But our source material explicitly calls out the fundamental inadequacy of relying on a human reviewer in high-stakes legal contexts. What's fascinating here is that it's a massive psychological trap.
I read that section of the report, and it instantly made sense. Think about how cognitive load works. Imagine you're downloading a new piece of software, and you get hit with a 50-page terms and conditions document. You're exhausted. You just want to use the app. Do you read every single line of that dense legal jargon to ensure it's accurate to your expectations?
Never. Nobody does.
No. Your brain naturally conserves energy. You glaze over it and just click accept.
And that's exactly what happens to the officer.
Right. You're that tired police officer. You feed your notes into Copilot, and 5 seconds later, it spits out a beautiful, grammatically flawless, highly structured 5-page court statement.
It looks perfect.
Because the AI's writing is so smooth and so confident, your brain's critical thinking apparatus essentially powers down. You read the first paragraph, it sounds great. You skim the second, it looks professional.
You just assume accuracy.
Exactly. Simply because the formatting and tone are so authoritative.
This is a deeply entrenched, well-documented psychological vulnerability. It's known as automation bias.
Automation bias.
Right. Human beings are psychologically wired to trust automated systems, especially when those systems present information in a highly polished format.
We just defer to the machine.
We do. When a machine produces something that looks finished, human reviewers naturally and subconsciously lower their guard. We defer to the machine's perceived authority.
We stop looking for errors because the grammar is perfect.
Precisely. The source material uses a very sharp phrase to describe this dynamic. It states that human review of AI output creates a, quote, dangerous illusion of oversight rather than genuine accountability.
Illusion of oversight. That is powerful.
The officer signing their name at the bottom of that court statement genuinely believes they have verified the document. But in reality, they've been lulled into a false sense of security by a machine that is architecturally incapable of knowing the truth.
The hypnotic confidence of an LLM basically exploits our natural tendency to avoid cognitive friction.
Exactly. So the whole just check the output argument becomes a completely bankrupt safety net when someone's literal liberty is on the line.
Okay, so the core use case here is just thoroughly debunked. I mean, the engineers hate it, the UK authorities have banned it, and the psychology of automation bias proves it's inherently dangerous.
It's a complete failure.
But I want to look at the other side of the tech community's sentiment. Does this mean artificial intelligence has absolutely zero place in the legal system? Like, is the door completely slammed shut?
Well, not completely. The summary from algorand.de notes that there is that 5% positive sentiment, right?
Right, the 5%.
Representing a minority of voices making a very specific concession. They suggested that AI might be acceptable, but only for strictly templated, low-risk administrative tasks.
And the main example they kept bringing up was transcription.
Yeah.
Converting audio recordings of suspect interrogations or witness interviews into text. But why does transcription get a pass to these highly critical developers when drafting statements is so heavily condemned?
It comes down to understanding the fundamental difference between a generative task and a processing task.
Yep.
Drafting a court statement is a generative task. You are asking the software to synthesize disjointed thoughts, structure a completely new narrative, and make active choices about which verbs and adjectives best convey an event.
And that synthesis is where the hallucinations are born.
Because it's guessing the next word.
Right.
Transcription, however, is a processing task. You are giving the AI an established, immutable input, an audio file, and asking it to simply map the acoustic sounds it hears to words in its dictionary.
So it's not inventing a narrative out of thin air.
Exactly. It's just translating a medium from audio to text.
But even with transcription, I can see how things could go sideways pretty fast.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, audio can be muffled, accents can be really thick. If an interrogation recording is grainy, the suspect might say, "I can't do that," and the AI transcribes it as, "I can do that."
Yes.
We're right back to a single word changing the legal reality of the case.
Which is exactly why the source material points out that even this more acceptable position comes with, quote, significant caveats.
It's not a silver bullet.
No, because you're absolutely right. A single mistranscribed syllable can be the difference between a confession and a denial.
Right.
So even for these lower-risk processing tasks, the stakes in the justice system demand strict human verification. An officer still has to sit there with headphones on, reading the AI transcript line by line while listening to the original audio to catch those inevitable phonetic errors.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of the time-saving shortcut if you have to do the work anyway.
It certainly diminishes the immediate return on investment, yeah.
So, tracing the thread of this entire deep dive,
Yeah.
we started with a sudden, full-stop ban by authorities in England and Wales on using AI for court statements.
Right.
We unpacked how the systemic failure of shadow IT allowed officers to bypass enterprise security and just pipe sensitive data into public tools like Copilot.
Which is still mind-blowing.
Totally. And we elevated the technical reality, learning why an LLM's reliance on statistical probability is just violently incompatible with the legal system's demand for absolute empirical truth.
It's a complete mismatch.
And finally, we saw how the human-in-the-loop defense falls completely flat against the psychological trap of automation bias.
It really is a perfect storm. It's a masterclass in what happens when technological capability vastly outpaces institutional caution.
So, for you listening right now, the takeaway extends far beyond the UK police force. The challenge is to look at your own workflow.
Definitely.
Are you falling victim to the illusion of oversight? When you ask an AI to summarize a crucial financial report, or draft a sensitive email to a client, or generate a block of code, are you genuinely verifying the factual output?
Or are you just skimming it?
Exactly. Is the beautiful formatting, the flawless grammar, and the confident tone lulling your brain into a state of automated compliance? Because if a highly polished piece of text can trick a trained, skeptical police officer into signing off on a subtle factual distortion, you have to admit that it can absolutely trick you too.
And applying that back to the facts we've explored today, it raises a massive, looming consequence for the justice system.
Oh, the retroactive stuff.
Yes. The directive from the authorities halted the use of AI, but as the report noted, this action was taken because police forces had already begun deploying these tools.
This ban is reactive.
They were already doing it.
The genie was already out of the bottle.
Exactly. Which leaves us with a lingering, deeply unsettling question.
Yeah.
What happens to the people who are convicted, sentenced, and sent to prison based on court statements that were drafted by Microsoft Copilot before this emergency brake was pulled?
That is wild to think about.
If the governing authorities are now officially admitting that these tools present a fundamental threat to legal integrity, are those closed cases now legally vulnerable?
We might be looking at retroactive chaos in the courts. Are we about to see a tidal wave of appeals built entirely on the argument that the foundational evidence of a crime was hallucinated by a predictive text algorithm?
It's very possible.
And suddenly, the idea of your physical freedom resting on a document drafted by a machine isn't just some theoretical debate for tech forums. It's the reality for an unknown number of people right now. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.